So you put your little things there. Just worry.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so the time is 4:32, and we will start our work session for today with community, cross-community learning with Trace Faust.
Good evening, everybody. Hello, how are you? Good. Okay, right. Good, good, good. All right, excited to continue on. We've only got 30 minutes, so I'm just going to jump right in. But nice to see you all. And this is one of our was the last kind of concrete planning item on your 90-day of the 30, 60, 90 before we sort of like move through implementation on various things, though some of the implementation, as you know, is already moving on some of those items. But the cross-community learning is the last topic that we just haven't explicitly talked about. And so I want to just frame up the conversation for tonight. In response to the community forums and conversation with town staff, particularly Scott, and just listening to you all, I kind of want to roll through when we talk about cross-community learning, really trying to narrow down where we're trying to focus our learning on. There's a lot of things to learn from other folks, other communities that are similar or different. And I don't want to just go out and say, what could we learn and go down all these different rabbit holes that are not actually related to the priorities that you all have named and heard from both yourselves, but also from your community. And so want to go through those, want to see if those land with you, want to get feedback around, are we warm on kind of where we're focused. And then really want to get ideas from you. I want to name that I'm not trying to do this in a silo. There's a lot of great resources, CML, COGS, et cetera, around relationships and other communities. And we'll certainly be tapping into that. But I see this as tonight getting a little bit more direction from you all of places and ideas and projects and things you're excited about or not excited about, so that we can kind of do some of that learning. And I would love to be able to invite some of you into conversations, potential field trips, et cetera, to do some of that learning. So I'm already plugged into a few projects across Colorado that are doing some of the cross-community learning. There's always room for electeds, town staff, et cetera. So once we kind of identify what we're wanting to learn and where, there will be some opportunities for y'all to kind of sign up to join if you're interested in that. So with that said, the three themes I want to put in front of you and get first like reactions to before we get into the where. So don't get into the examples yet, but just these three topics. I was talking to Scott about this and kind of was doing a gut check on both community forum data and also, folks doing the work. Like where do you think that there are the biggest opportunities for learning? And so we landed around three things. One, of course, is the economic development component. How are other towns attracting, sustaining businesses, kind of all things economic development. Two, good governance. What does it look like in other towns? What are their successes? What are their challenges? What have folks like piloted and what's going well for the unique challenges of mountain towns, of all the things, and community trust. So what does that actually mean to be in a space of trust with your community? Talking to Scott about the buzzword of consensus and how I actually don't like the word consensus, because I was like, I don't know that consensus is ever the goal. And a lot of times with community, I think we kind of miss those things. So are there communities that are tackling head on what it means to be in trust with their local government, what it means to be in trust with their town staff, and one another, even if you don't always like the decisions that are being made? And are there towns that are really doing well or have some bright spots that we could learn from on things they've piloted? So with that, before we get into examples of those things, we'll go one by one so that you don't have to remember those three buckets I just gave you. So again, good governance, economic development, and community trust as just starting places of things we could hone in on to learn from other communities. How does that land with you? Any additional ones or ones that feel like, no, that's not what we need to be focused on as far as learning from other places? You can give me a thumbs up if you're like, sounds good. Okay. I figured it's going to sound good, but okay, cool. So let's I would love to hear some ideas from you all. I have heard a number of things that, but it's a little scattered, to be honest, of like, we don't want that, right? And you hear that a lot from community is like, we don't want to be the next X, right? I'm talking about ideally, if you have like what you do like, or examples that you want to hone in on, or places that you've heard of or you're interested in learning about more. Primarily in Colorado, but if you have a great example where we could set up maybe a Zoom call with a local town government, electeds, et cetera, and could have an interesting learning conversation, totally open to that if it's outside the state, but obviously within Colorado would be easiest as far as like connections and relationships. So with that, let's go through each of the three. As it relates to economic development, curious, other towns, municipalities, leaders, communities that you are inspired by, you're excited about, you think, why can't we do that here, or some version of that here? Would love to hear any ideas you have of where we could dig in. So again, stay high level right now. We don't need to like hear the lesson, but just hear the ideas so that we can dig in further. And go ahead, Rachel.
Start. And so this is kind of based on some feedback that the Economic Development Advisory Committee had at our last meeting last week. I would like to know more about, and I'd like the council to know more about like what communities of our size, how they budget for economic development, how they manage economic development. I know at one time, at least 10 years ago, I think the town of Dillon did have an economic development person. I mean, I think that person also had other duties like marketing and events and things like that. But I think that even though we're small, there's, we're on the cusp of major redevelopment. And I think that to have like a focused effort on economic development for the town of Dillon would be very beneficial. And I don't know if that means like, so anyways, I guess in talking about learning from other communities, I'd love to know more about how other communities of our size and similarity, that has similarities to Dillon, even though I know we're very unique, but there's some out there, how they manage economic development. Do they have a position dedicated to the, because a lot of the ideas that EDAC has proposed, and the council will hear more about that when they do a formal, they're going to do like a memo recommending budget recommendations. But a lot of the ideas, it would make sense to kind of house in one person because we have a lot of great ideas, but our town staff is already maxed out with what they already do. So.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, so Rachel, that's a great example of like, not quite sure of an example of this, but would like to find an example. So this is where I'd like to tap into some of our partners, like again, CML, COGS, et cetera, of like your point about similar towns. I think the thing when you think about this is to not assume that the similar town has to have the entire profile of Dillon, but maybe there are particular components, right? That there's like seasonal economic development drivers that are like really stand out, from summer to winter, et cetera. Like that there's not a resort that drives that, those sorts of things, even though there might be other elements that don't quite with you that we could like hone in on one particular slice of a place. So love that as an example. Appreciate it. Who else? And again, we're just in the economic development piece. Any other places, ideas, people that you'd want to hear from, learn from,
Barb?
or projects, et cetera?
You're just going down the line here?
Yeah.
Okay. I still want to hear from Philip Sapino from First Light. He was the former Aspen Community Development Director, and he has some interesting ideas about community development where the community is the driver. And I've only spoken to him briefly and read a Colorado Sun article on him, and staff talked to him, and I just think his ideas would be interesting.
Great.
That's one. The other was Westminster. Shannon and I did the Westminster tour of their Westminster Mall redevelopment.
Okay.
And I did do a couple follow-up calls to them, but I'd like to get some more information on, they did some interesting things with that mall area. And they also started a foundation to assist them with economic development. because foundational money, if you get money given to foundations, has less strings on it, and you can do such things as assisting with grants to businesses, so incentive programs. And I don't know how they did it, and I would just like to know more about that.
Great. Thank you. Who else?
Kyle?
I think if we were a town outside of everything we have around us, we did.
Mm.
So, you know, what can we compare ourselves to with that kind of? I mean, we wouldn't have the amphitheater because we wouldn't have never been able to build it like that. We
Mhm.
would have to build one, which was awesome. But, you know, I just think you need to be looking at towns that are away from other cities that are not connected to other cities. See what they're doing.
Yeah, like places that are a little bit more standalone than like reliant on the things that happen to be 5 minutes down the road but aren't technically in their town.
Right.
Okay.
And bringing the people
Yeah.
into town that.
Yeah. There's a interesting, like I'm thinking of Alamosa is an interesting town that there's a lot of like learning happening right now because uniquely placed, they've got a lot of like community development support, a lot of local government support. And it's challenging because it's not really kind of baked into any larger ecosystem. That's one off the top of my head, but is that sort of the idea where it's a place that has that unique challenge and like what they're doing to sort of,
Yeah, I mean.
Yeah.
Pass through.
yeah, yeah,
It's amazing. They are doing,
right. Yeah, their main streets, like,
that they're growing.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Cool. Okay, great. Thanks, Josh. Anybody else? Going down the line. Shannon?
I think this is just kind of piggybacking maybe on what Rachel said, so it's a little more specific. but
Okay.
In doing that cross-community learning or towns of our size who have been successful at economic development or redevelopment, like some questions that I would go into it thinking about is, I think we need a concise like economic vision and target for business categories. Like, what does that mean for us here? And I've always been one who says like no chains in the core. Because
No what?
no chains
Uh-huh.
in the core, like that's a philosophy I always had. Like when I go back to towns that I really like visiting or think, hey, this is a pretty cool town. One thing I notice about all of them is they don't have chains in the core. It's
Mm.
unique. It's unique to that area and capitalizing on their strengths. And so that's something that I value, but
So are you wanting to see examples of, so like zooming out from that example as
Mhm.
like your value, are you wanting to see how towns manage those like values as it relates to economic development and how they sort of like build that framework to kind of drive their decision making within economic development? Is that what?
yeah, if they have
Yeah.
philosophies like that or
Yeah,
what their
okay.
philosophy was, maybe there's a town that's super successful and it's all chains in the core.
Yeah.
And they're like,
More
I-
chains.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
Right.
don't know, but
I
to
gotcha.
see what, like, what their vision was, what
Yep.
their economic identity was, and then how they built that.
Great.
And then, like then reevaluating that with what we have. So like, what barriers, if any, do we have?
Yep.
How do we, and what's the recommended fix for that?
Great.
And then one more is like, then what's the practical activation plan with short, medium, and long-term goals for us specifically?
Yep.
So.
Great. Thank you.
And I would like to see if you can find some place that is landlocked like Dillon is. They can't grow and they can't use money from other places to fix their town core because we have to be only redevelopment because we can't grow and make sure, but we have other business areas to fix our down core like a lot of other towns do.
Can you say that again? I want to make sure I'm understanding. So is it sort of like what Kyle's saying about towns that are so uniquely kind of sufficient in the way that they have to sustain themselves. And so say that again.
You gotta concentrate on a town that can't grow,
Okay.
okay? It's because there's no place for them to build another business center or another shopping center or
Got it.
something like that and use that money to help their town core.
Got it.
Because we need to have, we need to use whatever resources we have to redevelop rather than develop new.
Got it. Okay. That's helpful. Thank you. Anything to add?
Kind of along the same line, just the one town that came into mind, which I know is kind of, if I've got friends staying for a longer time, like to go up to Leadville. And Leadville, I'd say in the last couple of years seems to have really used what they have on their main street, and they've been able to give it a shot in the arm and be able to utilize what they have there. But they do have more land to expand and to grow a little bit as well. And they also are, to me, from what I've noticed, a no chain area, which is appealing as well to me. So just using Leadville as an example, it would be interesting to see how they were able to rejuvenate certain things. I was just up there not too long ago with Shannon as well. And we were noticing just their street signs and, certain things along that line that they've given a little, I don't want to say they're an art district by any mean, but it seemed to be very creative and their wayfinding was really unique. And a
Mhm.
lot of the stores that I probably noticed over the last couple of years have been rejuvenated with like a couple of smaller stores in one big space, or,
Mhm.
some of the bigger ones were still, seem to be doing great. And so there was a lot more and it seemed like they were, I'm gonna get my direction wrong, maybe south more, they're expanding their main street a little bit longer, it seems,
Mm.
with things, bike shops, things along that line, so, and utilizing the buildings that are there.
Yep. Okay. Great.
So my thoughts are a little different.
Yeah.
I think there's two categories, thinkers and doers.
Okay.
And I think we spend a lot of time in the thinking category and we don't know how to get to the point where we're doing. And I would love to hear from the Ridgeways, the Leadvilles, the Fairplays, of how they transitioned from all the thinking and the ideas to actually getting some of their stuff done. Like Ridgeway has, is very concerned about keeping character,
Mm-hmm.
but yet they've done a lot of things
Okay.
to further the town's image, art, attractiveness. I
Yeah.
think Fairplay is similar.
What was the third? You said Ridgeway, Fairplay, and what was the?
Leadville
okay.
was mentioned, but I would love to hear how those towns transitioned from all the thinking to actually start doing things, because those towns are doing things.
Yeah.
We're still thinking.
Great. I love that that's honestly like a good one that cuts across kind of all these, the economic development side. I mean, any of these topics.
How
sort of
did,
like, how do you just move to?
how did they cross that
Yeah.
barrier?
Yeah. Love it. Great. All right. Let's just being cognizant of time. Let's move. And I want to name one thing is, if you don't have an example, totally fine. But Ben, you were a great example of, can you find someone that's doing this, right? So just want to keep that in mind as we move to these other two. As it relates to good governance, the good governance piece, making decisions through a clear, consistent process where authority and roles are respected. I wrote down, the average definition: information flows openly between council, staff, and community. Disagreements get worked out through the process rather than around it. Doesn't mean everyone agrees. It means people trust how the decision got made, even when they don't love what the decision was, right? Do you know of, like, I'm hearing folks that, you have either friends or partners or family that live in other communities. I don't think that this has to be a town that is similarly sized necessarily. I think there's some interesting frameworks and structures that you could use, large and small. So don't feel like you can't use an example just because it's like a larger town than Dillon or something, or much smaller. But yeah, curious on the good governance side. Have you heard of examples of folks that are kind of crushing it that you would love to learn from them around how they either made that pivot to get to the good governance piece, or just how they're an iterative body that's continuing to learn how to be a better governing body? I almost kind of open it up.
All right.
Yeah, Shannon.
I just got, I think we all probably got it, is the most recent publication of the CML.
Yep.
Booklet, and they cited Lakewood. They had a whole article in there about Lakewood and their public outreach through digital platforms and how they are communicating. And it sounded, I mean, although some of it is much larger than us and
Sure.
maybe wouldn't have such a big home here, but I think it interested me because it really included the community and
Mhm.
sending out. One example I can think of tonight is, we have an item on our agenda that is going to have a public hearing in 2 weeks. And I think there was either miscommunication or just misunderstanding for whatever reason. No blame there, but that a decision tonight means the decision in 2 weeks is already made. And I think a great opportunity would be to send out a piece of education when we're having big decisions that the community is really interested in. Just kind of a little education piece instead of assuming that everybody knows that tonight is just to set the public hearing, and that council really hasn't been provided with any of the information that the public probably already has. Council has not been provided with that, and that's the quasi judicial process.
Great.
But I think, just educating along the way. Here's a good topic to educate, just little bite-sized pieces so that people feel like they are being included all along the way.
Great.
That our community does.
Great. So I can look at the piece from the Lakewood piece, but also just generally who's doing that. It's kind of, I think, the concept of bringing people along with you, right? Where folks aren't surprised, community feels brought along, even if they don't love all the things.
I think in bite-sized chunks.
Yeah. Yep.
Just little bites all along the way. And then they'll have the whole meal
change
at the end.
management to
And
like
then,
a thing.
yeah.
Yeah. Love that. What about on the good governance piece? Anybody here particularly inspired by anything you've heard about, like, you all are not, you all know this, you receive a lot of criticism as a governing body, right? You can look in your, the council before you, the 3 ousted members, that sort of thing, like the comments that folks come and give to you now, like you're not immune obviously to criticism in general, but people, criticize you as a governing body. They criticize, every governing body is gets criticized. And curious if you have heard of or are interested in any kind of shining stars of councils, local governments that even through contention seem to have the good governance component of disagreement through dialogue, that sort of thing that we could do some learning from, or just, hear from them. Any ideas or things or stories you've heard that you're like, oh, could we hear a little bit more about that? Or
At CML, Castle Rock kind of did a presentation, was pretty interesting about making it, how you work through all sorts of contentious ideas.
Yeah.
Or contentious, not ideas, contentious projects, contentious topics.
Particularly within like the council or, okay, cool.
The other one too was building a good culture, and that was from the Employers Council because
Employers
Employers Council,
Okay.
good governance, government runs on staff.
Yeah.
So it's people.
Yep.
And so I thought their presentation was interesting as well.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Anyone else?
On the good governance piece? Yeah.
I've being part of the Longmont community for a long time, as
Yeah.
well as here, and then hearing reinforcement from CML on how they've handled their communication and their layers, not just from council, but all the layers down to street level.
Yeah.
And they get things done. And
Great.
being the oldest downtown development association in the state and one of the
Oh.
most successful
Is Longmont?
is Longmont.
Cool. Okay.
I think it's worth seeing how they communicate with all the different levels and how that translates to a really attractive old town.
Great. Thank you for that. All right, last one. This one's always like, I'm just curious. On the community trust side, I often say that like regardless of what container I'm working in, so like I've worked in education policy, I've worked in workforce development, I've worked in like local government, there's always this tension, right, of the community trust piece that is not unique clearly to local government. It is obviously more elevated right now with just the way that our world feels to folks and how fractured our trust is with one another, right, on a neighbor level, but also on a government level, et cetera. So I'm curious if you have a good example. I would love to hear it. On the community trust piece, and if again, not because they're perfect, but because they're doing one element potentially well, or you've heard something or you've seen something. Yeah, curious to hear from you all. Any ideas here? And I want to name Barb I just lost my note, the Employment Council.
Employers Council, yeah.
Employers Council. I think the cross community learning thing is going to be interesting to actually try and not hear presentations on theories, but focus on folks that are doing it,
Mhm.
and I'm not saying that they're not doing it because maybe they could point us to the folks that are.
Well, they
carrying out
work
their
with
frameworks.
they work with a ton of communities in Colorado.
Exactly. So getting like one of those actual communities, because I feel like that, I feel like what's unique around cross community learning is just getting into the weeds a little bit with folks that understand that like day-to-day real challenge, both for town staff, for electeds, et cetera. So any ideas on the community trust piece that you've heard of or that you're interested in, or if you don't have an example, something specifically as it relates to community trust, and I'll just name the communication piece.
Yeah.
Shannon, you named already, so I'm going to put that in there already. So it's not on that piece, but any particular examples?
I think it's communication and education, who's doing it well. Another one from CML, sorry, it's already cross community.
Well, no, I mean, that's what they do is
Yeah.
the cross.
Yeah, I
They're a
know.
huge resource in this, which
Okay,
is great.
so Windsor did a presentation on their civic academy, and
Okay.
this is the hot new thing along with a lot of communities,
Okay.
is to do the civic academy and teach people how decisions are made, and they learn about what happens in every department. The smaller towns are doing like a 5-week thing.
Okay.
Community members sign up for it. It was, and you build trust because the first group goes out and then gives word of mouth to others about what they learned about how the whole town works.
It's like a peek behind the curtain.
And they do a practice where they sit as council and they have to make hard decisions.
Okay.
And so it was a really good, once again, it was a really interesting presentation. Now they're small, but they're also big Front Range, next to
Yeah.
Greeley.
But maybe some interesting elements that we could.
They
pull
had
from
some
there.
really interesting elements in there.
Cool. Anybody else on the community trust piece?
Yeah, that's it. It's a view behind the curtain.
Yeah. It's just interesting that out of all, like, that this is the one where we're kind of like,
Well, you can't just say, trust me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all
Right.
action based.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just like who's doing it well. It's a tough time to uplift who's doing it well, because it's a tough time to say that, yeah, man, that community is really locked in. Everybody's on the same page, Any other ideas on this one? Okay, great. All right. So I'm going to take this list from each section, or lack of list. I'm going to narrow it down a little bit because I don't want to take those learnings again too wide, to really just start somewhere. I think this would be a really great thing, regardless of this council, any future councils, et cetera, to just be in practice of, which is being in a relationship with other places that are doing similar work, that are facing similar challenges. And how can you really be part of, in my world, it's called a community of practice, right? Anybody ever heard of community of practice, where you're bringing folks together around similar experiences to just learn from one another, to do some peer exchange. And so I would love for this to be a muscle that we help you all build, that you do, that councils do beyond just you, to continue to be in conversation with one another. So That's what I'm going to do. I'll come back to you again. There's opportunities for peer conversations, site visits. No decision tonight other than just your generated ideas because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't missing something from you all. I also have some additional ideas that came up from the community forums. And I'm also going to be talking with town staff because I know some of them have experience in other towns as well that maybe they would like to bring to the table. So, and then I'll work directly to sort of like bring up a plan around these 3 pillars so that we can hit the ground running on some of these learning pieces and hopefully bring folks back for conversations here. And if there's one particular, I'll be reaching out to you all. If there's one of these pillars that you're particularly interested in that you'd like to do some of that learning on, to join me in those conversations instead of me just being a conduit, to come back and share that with you. So cool. Great.
Appreciate it. Thank you so
It's
much.
5:02, so I'm right on time, not to brag.
I was going to give you 1 more minute.
My goal was for you to not say, all right, Trace. Okay, thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Yes. Okay, agenda item 2, budget discussion, revenues, parking fund, conservation trust fund, and cemetery fund. Heather?
Greetings. My name is Heather Pizzola, Council, Mayor. Tonight in your packet is the 2027 revenue discussion and how we plan on budgeting revenues for 2027. Currently, our revenue picture is that we are down 5.78% or 262K through June 30th of this year. As a reminder, last year, our total year ended the year 4.4% down or 281K. So I just wanted to give you guys that information that we were down last year. We're down a little bit more this year. There's some opportunity that will come back up or we could go down further. And so that's kind of the exercise we do when we analyze our revenues and decide how we're going to project for 2027. I would attribute some of this decline to some obvious circumstances surrounding the economy. I think we have a little bit of a weakened tourist economy this year, a national economy. And then I think the low snowfall year is partially to blame. And then I think it has been mentioned, some of the fire, people being scared about fire danger and stuff. But, we're all aware of how high gas prices were this summer and they're evening out a little bit, but I just think consumer sentiment is a little bit lower and we're seeing that in the mountain communities. So currently we project the remainder of the year to be down 2%. We did have the unique opportunity to already amend our 26 budget. So this is already included in our 2026 numbers. And what we're looking to do from here is that we'll budget 27 flat to 26 is the ultimate goal. I will remind you that we also, for 26, in order to balance the budget, we did a $200,000 one-time transfer from the capital fund to the general fund. We do not intend to do that again in 2027. So I just wanted to make sure everybody is aware of that piece in the 2026 budget. And that amendment we talked about it on July 28th, and then we adopted that supplemental appropriation to amend the 26 budget on August 4th. So with all that said, where we stand now is we'll budget 27 flat to 26 with a 26 being 2% down from 25. At the retreat, we will receive our sales tax data for July on September 10th. So we'll have a little bit of time to kind of analyze where we're at and do we need to make any more pivots with our sales tax for the 27 budget. And yeah, so staff would recommend using this average year-to-year decline to be conservative for 27. And are you guys comfortable with this?
Comments from?
Well, I agree that we should be conservative in 2027, because if we get any extra, we can always use that for something that we need to.
Other comments, Linda?
Agree.
I have some concerns that I don't know how to take them into account, but we're going to have funding cuts on the national level that are going to come into effect after the election, and that was intentionally done. And I know at the mayor manager's countywide meeting, this was like the biggest topic that was discussed. and everybody was very concerned and took it extremely seriously of how this is going to affect us next year,
Right.
because we're not going to have grant funding. We're not going to have federal funding. The county is not going to have money. It's going to trickle down to us as towns to support some of the critical social support. And I don't know how that's going to affect our economy.
I think that, Scott and I were talking about some of these, we call them intergovernmental agreements, you're all aware of that, but IGAs, and we were talking about some of the implications of those IGAs as it relates to coming from the county and what we're anticipating. And so I don't think that'll impact our revenue budget so much, but I do think we are going to have a very challenging year in balancing our general fund budget for 2027. So we are considering those items in the 2027 budget as we have information from the county and other
So-
constituents that are
so-
going to be looking for some additional funding, I think, in 2027.
So for us having to tighten our belts is going to leave a lot of the social support structures even more, I don't know whether desperate's the right word, but concerned. And will that have a spillover effect to how people are spending money here, our local population?
It's possible. So I will give you a little bit more back pocket information that we do analyze in the sales tax. So we analyze numerous factors. So we look at our lodging tax, we look at other tax revenue, and we do a full analysis on what's going on. In addition to that, we have looked at what happened in legislative session, so what the state thinks is going to happen in 2027. And I also talked to the other municipalities up here on what everybody else is doing. So I can say that this 2027 revenue budget, we are actually very much in line with how our comparable jurisdictions up here are doing the 2027 budget. But I do think I would agree with you 100%
Yeah,
that I
I mean,
think that we are in a
those are my
unique
concerns.
environment.
Yeah, that's my main concern.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and I like as always, conservative, I think is best. This was an extremely odd year. Just looking from the lodging perspective. And of course, you have to have heads and beds to spend money. So, it was a really odd drought year. We'll just call it a drought year for winter and summer. And we'll see what the numbers show, but, I think we have to take that in mind, because weather events are, affecting travel more.
Thank you, guys. Anybody else? We're going to move on to, okay. You want me to stay up here?
So, Mr. Mayor, the next item to talk about, if we're done with revenues, is number 2.2. So this is a budget discussion on special revenue funds. Could we, Jesse, could we unmute Carrie McDonald so that she can jump in and help with this if needed? Carrie, can you hear us?
I can, thank you.
Hi, Carrie.
Yep, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great.
So as a reminder, at the next meeting, we're going to talk about the enterprise funds, which is the water fund and the sewer fund. That will be September 1st. And then we're going to talk about the general fund, the capital fund, the streets fund, housing 5A, and Durban Urban Renewal Authority Fund at the retreat on September 14th. So tonight we're going to talk about the special revenue funds. So that includes parking, conservation trust, and cemetery perpetual care funds. And this is what we're budgeting for 2027. And Carrie, jump in if you need to.
Okay.
So these are smaller funds, and we like to kind of get these out of the way first. So the first one we're going to talk about is the parking fund. And obviously revenues for this fund are the parking fees from the various town lots that we have. And so it's not a lot of money, but it's an important amount of money. We don't have any expenditures for this year, but we would like to next year for 27. We're running out of room down below here for the PD for vehicles. And really, if you look at both lots during the day, they're both pretty full. And so Dan's worked on a plan to expand the lot down here. And so that we're proposing that would be our project for next year. And we can talk more about that if you'd like to see later on in this budget cycle, if you'd like to see some sort of a plan, conceptual plan on what that looks like. We'd be happy to do that so we can talk about it more. But so that's a pretty easy one. Any questions on the parking fund?
Yeah, I just like to know more about the lot and what the, is it just for PD? Can it handle other town workers? How, what? You guys.
All of
how
the
you
above.
How you identified this parking lot is important.
Okay. Yeah, and I'd be happy to present some information at a work session a little bit later, but it would be expanding the lot, having a separate in and out. Right now, you kind of drive in, then you have to back out, so it's unsafe. It would be nice to have all of our patrol cars in one lot. Employee parking, if there's spaces available in that lot, they use that, or they use the lot up here. But yeah, we have more equipment. It would be nice to be able to kind of park it in appropriate, useful places. So
Well, the big generators out there,
it is.
backup generators. So how that figures in? 'Cause
We're going to leave that there.
Okay,
I'm not going to move that.
because it's fairly
Um,
close. That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, so the plan would be to take what we have and actually push the parking that way and have probably have a in on Buffalo and an out on Lake Dillon Drive. So basically, probably doubling the size of what we have right now. Other questions?
So all the landscaping and everything would be in there?
We would include revegetation and all of that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't have any irrigation systems down there, but we would revegetate the area.
Right now, it's all dirt, so it should be pretty easy to do that.
Yeah, I just meant that that's such an important corner. We want it to look nice at the end.
And yeah, we would do that.
I mean, in a perfect world, I'd also say, could we put canopy solar on top of it? And put the cars underneath, but that's perfect world.
It would be a perfect world. I'm not sure, given the budget for 27, that we could do projects like that. But, so if there are no other questions, I can move on to next up is the Conservation Trust Fund. And so the revenues for this fund are lottery proceeds in Colorado, $11,000, and interest that we earn on it. We haven't had any expenditures in this count. Usually what we do with these smaller funds is we let them build for a little while. And then once we have some cash available, then if we have something that will meet the need for what the funds are set up for, then we'll go ahead and do that. In this case, expenditures need to be used for parks and open space. We have been talking for some time about improvements to the nature preserve entryway and the nature preserve signage and the nature preserve parking area. And so we want to get started with some seed money for geotechnical and design. So we have $100,000 in there for next year to do that. Keep in mind that we've also talked about the other side of the road, XL decel lanes for safety reasons and improvements on the cemetery side. And so when we get to cemetery, you'll see that we also have $100,000 earmarked for not only the design of the entry, the parking improvements and the nature preserve, some signage, but also I've talked with you before about we don't have good XL and decel lanes from the cemetery side or from the nature preserve side. And with as much traffic as we're seeing on both sides of it now with disc golf and with the nature preserve, it is a bit of a safety issue. So that's the one expenditure that we have in there for 27. Any questions on the Conservation Trust Fund?
I do. Right. So is this just for design or is it for implementation as well?
So this is for design. Implementation we would look to fund that out of the capital budget.
Okay.
But right now, we don't know what the potential costs will be for the roadway improvements, the parking lot improvements, and whatnot. And so we need to get some design work done first. And so that involves some in-house, but also some expertise. We're going to have to do some drilling, some geotechnical investigation, so on and so forth. But so I don't have a firm price on the improvements in capital yet.
When looking at the design, is there any room in this to also look at that social trail that's along the bike path there to, I mean, if we're looking at this as a whole?
We
'cause
could,
that's kind of, I mean, I think that's kind of and I've heard you mention that before, but that's kind of an important piece there, that there's more and more bikers. And so to get the pedestrians on that social trail safely and
I tried to do that this year, but the county had already done commitments with other projects that they're working on. We've done a lot of our trail work in conjunction with county open space. So I'm happy to have that conversation again. There's different ways that we can do that. The county can help us. There's volunteer groups that could help us with that. But so the trail that we're talking about is a part of our Trails Master Plan. You'll recall that we talked about a trail from the nature preserve parking. So this is a foot trail. This is a soft surface trail, parallel to the existing rec path, but uphill next to where the trees are. And there's kind of a defined line where those trees are. And this would be a soft trail, a dirt trail, foot traffic only, for people to walk safely on that trail. With a lot of people like to walk their dogs on Roberts Tunnel. This would get them safely from the nature preserve down to the Roberts Tunnel and not be on the rec path where there's a little more dangerous, a hill. Bikes are traveling fast. People aren't always looking out for each other. But yes, I'm happy to look into that. Yep.
Yeah, I'm in the same vein. It's for parks kind of, so parking is important to get people to the park.
You need parking for a park.
You need parking for a park, and that is heavily used both summer, winter.
Yeah.
And so I agree with that part, but I'd like to have a little more, how does it work with
Okay.
with everything?
So I'm happy to adjust that with Carrie. Maybe we can add another line item and dedicate some funding specifically for that, that trail. Any other questions on the Conservation Trust Fund? Okay, so now we will move on to the Cemetery Fund. So revenues include the sale of lots, capital fee and interest. We are not planning for any fee increases at this time. That is something that Adrian and I talk about evaluating from time to time. The expenditures must be used for cemetery only. This year, our project was the survey marking project. It's called cemetery signage, but they're survey monuments, additional survey monuments on all the corners of the plots in the cemetery. And that just helps us identify where spaces are. It allows different plot owners to more quickly identify where maybe their plot is located. And anytime we're doing a burial, right now we're just about setting up a transit to at the corners of the rows and then measuring out where the distances are in order to locate a gravesite. So what the project we're doing, we've needed to do for a long time, and it's great. But that was the project for this year. And then again, we have that money in there for improvements to the entryway, improvements to XL, decel lanes, and signage for the cemetery. Any questions? Nope. Okay. Carrie, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I think the only thing I would add is just to remind you that we are going to be going through in more detail the rest of the budgets on September 14th. So we could certainly have some follow-up with some of the things that were brought up tonight. And then we will present the whole, just so the public understands, we're doing this slightly different than in past years. So we've got these funds tonight. We've got the utility funds, water and sewer on September 1st. And then on September 14th, we'll do all the other funds. But we will present the entire budget, all funds, on October 6th as required by our charter. And then there'll be a public hearing on November 3rd, and then we will adopt on December 1st. So just to give you that time frame.
Yes,
Can we go back to the police department?
sure.
Kind of on what Barb was requesting. When you have plans made up, could you see what it would take to add, to build it? Just as a parking lot, but with enough room to add. Or, you know, some kind of.
Carport,
Yes.
yes.
Preferably one that generates energy, but.
We do have solar on our roof.
I know, but it's old. You were telling me.
It
the
is.
Older system and the newer systems are much more efficient. It's just one of those. it's
There
one-
is a capital, there's a cost for capital outlay for that.
Okay.
And
to
so,
Fix this one.
well, this one still works,
Yeah.
but not well. This efficiency has gone way down. And that's what you expect over time. Did we, with what we're doing up there, did we recover our capital capital outlay that we made for that project? I'm not sure that we did.
Yeah, and now it's less expensive, so it's.
Right,
one
and
of
so-
the things. It has to be, the financial has to be examined.
So I'm happy to look at that and maybe that's something that John and Ned could look into. And you know, what would the cost, what are the efficiencies, what is the payback? But yeah, I agree that we could absolutely look for some, if that doesn't work, some inexpensive covering.
Or just a way to build the lot.
Yes.
So that it can.
Yeah.
Have a carport when we can afford it.
Yes.
Yeah, so, well, they're calling it solar ready too.
Those
Yeah.
vehicles should
Build.
be, or the officers
Um,
didn't have to. clear
yeah.
them, so.
And you do see, I mean, it's very common. You see those at a lot of the car dealerships now. And they have those kind of canopy like coverings, but then some of them have solar coverings too.
Yeah.
Very attractively done and they look really nice. I don't know what the cost of those
No,
systems
I
are.
don't either. I saw them at a
Yeah.
military base. So
Right, yeah.
so all the military vehicles are under the solar canopy.
Right.
And so how's it being for this? What's Keystone's part of it? And in future projects when you have a project, you go, hey, Keystone, what do you want to throw in? Or is
Yeah.
that just a part of the annual budget? That it's.
So we have our agreement with Keystone and so there is some cost recovery for some of the capital outlay. Carrie, is this something you think that would qualify because some of those patrol cars are paid for by Keystone?
Yeah, I think that's a discussion with Keystone because I don't think it's addressed in the current IGA.
I don't think it is either.
Yeah, so I think that would just be a discussion with them down the road if there would be some sort of cost
Okay.
recovery from them for the parking lot itself. And I know there's, you know, they're paying for half of the facility analysis to look at future building space. So that the towns of Dillon and Keystone are combined are putting money in this year for facility analysis.
So I'm happy to have that conversation with Keystone and with Kale. But yeah, I think, you know, the situation down below is getting a little desperate for those guys. And if we have the money, it'd be great to make those improvements.
I have a question about this. Since we are evaluating a new facility, what is the timeline for that? Like, is there any timeline as to when that's going to be built? Because then is the parking lot that we're building or potentially building here something that we actually want in the future? Or is this just a temporary until the facility and then, you know, if we got a new police facility and then I'm just kind of wondering having a parking lot on Lake Dillon Drive isn't the most attractive thing to do. And if it's just temporary, or does that become a town lot, or does that become, like, what's the future plan for that if our police department moves into a different space?
So I don't know what that looks like yet. And if it's just us and Keystone that are planning a new facility, that's going to be a pretty expensive endeavor. Something that we're looking into is, can there be other partners in that project? If there are other partners and it becomes more affordable for all of those partners, then we could probably move that project up. But I don't see us doing anything in the next 2 to 3 years with that. And so this won't be wasted. Keep in mind that at some point in the future, I'm going to need to find a home, or the town's going to need to find a home for the events department, and they're currently renting. And so moving back to this building not only might be a way to save money, but that might be a perfect space for them down there.
So a future shuffle.
Yep. I haven't talked with Jessie about that, so I don't know if I can't tell, the computers are really high, so I can't tell if she's scowling at me or. All right. Yeah, I never think parking lots are a waste. I mean, I'm a public works guy. I like parking lots and I like streets, and they're important.
No, I like them too, and I didn't mean
Yeah.
waste. I meant, is it the ideal spot, or are we just making do with what we have?
Well, and keep in mind, we don't know what the future looks like, but there have been, right now we're talking about a new police facility. Could that be a police public works facility? Could it be a police public works, CDOT, county facility? Those are the other partners I'm talking about. If it's just a Keystone Dillon police facility, at some point, Public Works needs a new shop. Don't know what that looks like. And at some point, in the future, the town of Dillon is going to need a new town hall. And all of those things are going to cost a lot of money.
Have a half hour left.
I know. You want me
Is
to?
As our other budget.
I don't think
discussion?
so. Heather, did you have anything that you wanted to touch on, or?
I think so.
Okay. Carrie, anything you can think of that we should take this opportunity?
I don't think so. I mean, I think right now, we're going to be moving forward on the utilities and then the retreat.
Yep.
Are there any projections on Nordstrom Rack and their contributions in the last quarter?
Yeah, so we have done an analysis on that, but we kind of look at over under of potential closures versus opening. And so that is included in our analysis.
And Jesse, isn't there there's a planned event for the opening of Nordstrom? Do you remember what the date is on that? Is it in October?
October 1st. October 1st.
Yeah,
Really early.
yeah.
But I guess it's because they're opening that. Like
They got a raffle and stuff like that.
Yes.
Okay,
Speaking of grand openings, I don't want to steal anyone's fire, but they are finally applying the coloring to the pickleball courts out there. And I did get an inquiry from the Summit Pickleball Club about some sort of a ribbon cutting for the pickleball. If that's something, if you guys give me the nod, I can talk to them about what that looks like. But
We were also talking about, we haven't done a ribbon cutting on the playground over at we didn't do that yet either.
for the preschool,
Mm-hmm.
okay, all right.
Do you guys want me to use this time to give the financial update?
Is what?
Do you want me to do the financial?
We could, we got Heather up here. Do you want
Yeah.
to
Okay.
go
I'd
into the
love to
financial update?
have that.
Let me give you another number spiel. So in your packet tonight is the June financial report. So this marks the end of Q2 and kind of halfway through the year of where we sit. And as of June 2026 revenues are at 44.9% of the 2026 budget. But we took some time this month to give you information on some of our accruals and just do a narrative in the report on if we move a couple items and where we land. So when we do that in the narrative, we're actually at 34K or 0.4% above 2025. If you guys have questions about those, I can walk you through them, but I wasn't planning on giving like a ton of detail on those. One of them is the developer receivable that I've been calling out each month that we have. And we just refunded half of that. So now we only have the 303, 182 in there, and then we'll be refunding that at the end of the year. So that item actually isn't a revenue to us, but the way our accounting works, we have to include it so cash balances. So the expenses are currently sitting at 2.7% below 2025. But again, in the accounting descriptions that we've given you, moving some of our accruals and accounting for the audit and AJEs, we're actually at $1.4 million or 16% above 2025. So at this point last year in 2025, revenues were at 50.5% of the budget and expenses were 40.1% of the budget. And I like to give you guys that 2025 comparison just because from a numbers perspective, that's what I always benchmark off of, is looking at the prior year and, are we in line with how we were spending last year, or are we drastically over under and need a pivot? And then we also look at some of our seasonal activity when we do that analysis. I did incorporate feedback from our last financial update that we've consolidated Marina with the general fund. It's on page 2, Jesse. The page 3, sorry. I'm lying to you.
Four.
Yeah, page 4. Yeah, so here we used to have, because Marina was absorbed into the general fund in 2024, at the last meeting, Barb had asked to consolidate those into one line item because the Marina is actually in the general fund. So we did go ahead and do that so that it's clear that that's where that stands. So that's in this report. And Jesse, if we could go back to page 2, it talks about page 3, sorry. We have more pages because of my description this month, so I'm a little out of whack. So page 3, town events is 1.6% below in expenses as compared to 2025. And concerts is 78.7% below 25. And that's due to the reclassification of that ticketing pass-through that we asked in the budget methodologies when we talked to you guys on July 28th and August 4th. So we went ahead and reclassified that as a contra revenue account. So it changes some of our comparable data, but and so it makes it look like they're way below prior year. And then on page 4 is our page 5, sorry, cash position. So this is all where all of our investments and our current yield stand for through June. And then on our last page is our budget to actual comparisons. Sorry, last page is actually page 6. And this shows where our budget stands. I will give the caveat that due to timing, the amended budget numbers aren't in here, but you will see those numbers for the 2026 amendments we did on August 4th. You'll see those in the next iteration of our financial statements. So with all that said, I did want to give you guys some information on sales tax through Q2. So as we mentioned in the revenue discussion, we are down 5.78% or 262K. That's across all funds. So it's important to know that's our sales tax that gets allocated across all of our funds. And for June, our sales tax is down 3.62% or 30K as compared to June 2025. So in the general fund, we're in a deficit of 67K in sales tax through June. So that's why we kind of talked through that 2% and why we feel comfortable with that number is because we track each sales tax that comes in a little, into each fund a little bit differently. So on pages 8 through 11, it's actually probably 9 through 12, you'll see how each sector of the town's sales tax is performing. And then on pages, I think it's 13 and 14 is our lodging tax. So we are in a much different place with lodging tax this year than we were last year. So lodging tax through Q2 is down $10,000 or 11.76% compared to June 25. But our year-to-date is down $141,000 or 12.82%. So we have seen a decline in lodging and guests coming to our area this summer. Last year, we didn't see that big dip because we attributed that short-term rentals were charging a higher ADR, average daily rate. And we just noticed that that's a big difference of 25 to 26. So all that said, we are under budget by 252K in our lodging taxes. And I did actually prepare based on our conversation at our last meeting when I presented the May financials. You all asked me for some information on Mountain Town's sales tax. So I compiled through CAST, and with the caveat that we don't have all of Q2 numbers in the data so far. So through Q1 across 19 mountain towns, the average decline is 6.2% this year. And if we remove any increases, because there's actually a few jurisdictions that have had year-over-year increases, across those mountain towns, we're down 9.04%. So we're not in this alone, seeing some of our tourist economy go down this year. So I think that, it feels good to know it's not just us. Everybody is seeing some of that. So I did get some of that data. I can tell you a couple municipalities that are up, which include Durango, Estes Park, Glenwood Springs is up, and Granby. Do you guys have any questions for me?
So I'll be at the cast retreat next week for 2 days
Oh,
and
nice.
probably get to hear firsthand
Yeah.
on all this, and I'll have a heads up from you as to what to ask.
I have a question. So Heather, it looks like the red line is short-term rentals.
Yes.
So it looks like it went, well, it's almost looks flat from 25 to 26.
Yeah, that's why
Did
it's
you
down that 10K.
Not very much.
But that makes me wonder.
But
if
that's actually down, or
it's slightly down.
it is down?
Yeah.
Okay. Slightly, yeah. Just looks, it's an optical illusion.
Because you have to get the access higher. Sometimes they
Yeah.
don't show
Yeah,
the drasticness.
yeah, I see.
And those two taxes do track differently because we have our lodging short-term rental tax, the excise tax that hotels in town don't have. So that's,
So what's going on with the Glenwood and Durango, was it?
I don't know. I was curious.
Why are they bucking the trend? What are they doing to buck?
Maybe they had a big sales tax audit. That's always a possibility. Their tax collections is getting a little harder on.
Or maybe they had new
Taxpayer.
business.
What was that, Carrie?
She said maybe they had new business.
Oh, I see. Are all the towns being very competitive towards each other in order to, I mean, if some towns are being more aggressive than other towns, the only way to avoid the downturn is to take away from someone else.
I don't know how that works. I
Or
do
attract new
m-
business.
marketing, economic development.
Yeah.
That could be possible.
Or invest in your assets, your
so-
town assets.
I was at the Verbo meeting for the mountain towns near us. So Breckenridge, Beaver Creek, Vale, Steamboat, we were all there. And Verbo did say, it doesn't matter how much they advertise, if the demand is not there for the mountains this summer, it's not there. So they just felt it was there was soft demand in general. So, in other words, you cannot create, if people don't want to come to the mountains, you can't drive them to the mountains very easily.
Councilmember Richards, I have heard that businesses are seeing an increase here in the fall, and that there's an expectation that fall could be
August and September bookings are stronger.
okay.
Partly the price does drop, and also gas prices, the economy, the wildfire threat passing. Yeah, there's all those pieces and parts
Okay.
that was discussed too.
And
And
an early winter, hopefully.
could be an early winter. Everyone's excited about the El Nino. And so that was a big topic of conversation. Um, uh, yes, it was all over. They were kind of discussing all sorts of things, but that general demand was kind of the one. And also the key data presentation for the full US is, it was softer this summer, except for, of course, the World Cup locations. Like you said, consumer sentiment, you mentioned that before.
Yeah. Anybody else?
Mr. Mayor, would you like to continue with staff updates?
Oh, we might as well, yes.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Heather.
We could do town engineers report or senior planners report.
Dan, can you run up here real quick? Dan's online.
Okay,
Ned's in the back too.
Ned?
Ned, are you ready to give your update? Up, is that Dan?
Understand.
Oh, here we go.
Okay.
Yeah, you can sit.
Neat new stuff. There's a lot going on. We're working on the overlay projects. Both of those right now are tentatively scheduled for the second full week in September. So we're working through all the coordination with the county and CDOT, Denver Water, to get the Dillon Dam Road done. You'll see a contract tonight for the 10-foot overlay. And we're working on getting the traffic controls plans done for that as well. EV charger parking lots in progress. There's been some contract issues, not a big deal. They're just so busy they can't get stuff done. So they're working on getting us the bonds. And then hopefully they'll get started on that here in the next week or two. And the Dillon Plaza, the restroom building, that project's out to bid. So we hope to bring a contract to you guys the second week in September. And then there's a bunch of other little things working on.
Dan, real quick,
So-
did we have Columbine Hills Concrete is going to do the roundabout for us? Is that,
No,
they're not? No, the dam road, yes.
yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
The week of September.
Okay, so you've talked to them and I just, for the,
Scheduled the mill for the 14th.
okay. For the record, I don't know if you're probably all aware, but Swan Mountain is now open.
Oh,
And I drove it. I've been waiting for it to be open. And so this morning, I drove Swan Mountain and it's amazing. It's a beautiful roadway. So if you have an opportunity, take a drive on our new road.
Or a bike ride.
Or a bike ride. Yep.
Which was fabulous.
Yep. You can go around the lake again. And then Dan, I don't know if you overheard our conversation earlier, or if we were talking about the parking fund and the possibility of doing the PD parking lot down here. And
Mhm.
I know it's something that you and I have talked about. I've seen a couple of just some concept plans, but I don't know if you had anything you wanted to talk about with
No,
that.
you covered it really well.
Okay.
I mean, there's a way to fit a parking lot out. We got a bid from Columbine to do something simple. About an L-shaped parking lot 3 years ago, but we didn't have the money for it. I think, so we don't have a new plan to show you, but we can maximize the parking down there and we can plan, so they can put carports or whatever your heart desires down the road by just making the spaces a little wider or whatever. As far as an EV charger things, those are expensive, but if you guys, that's what you want. The one thing, they put all those in at SeaWorld in San Antonio. And it's really nice because you park underneath them and it's shady and everything, but they're really, really noisy. They sound like jet engines sometimes because the fans just run like crazy. And so you get something you want, but you get something you don't want. So they make a lot of noise, but if that's what you guys want, we can certainly look into it. But it takes it's not in the $400,000 budget. you know, that kind of electrical system is going to need transformers and
Mhm.
all those loading camps. So that's probably another $250,000 to add something like that. I'm just throwing something out there that I don't know. But we put $400,000 in there to do a surface park. What Scott says is that we'd have an access off Lake Dillon Drive, because right now the police department has to back out into Buffalo and then go out to Lake Dillon Drive. So it would just be an out because there's a median in Lake Dillon Drive, so they can't turn left. So if they needed to go left, they would go out to Buffalo a lot. But it would be a huge improvement, and it's pretty simple to do. And as with regards to how it would look, we can certainly put a landscape border around it, and we can definitely plant some trees. And, you know, you can work with Scott and Evan to figure out how to get some drip irrigation to those trees. So, but it'll look like a parking lot. It'll look like a new parking lot. It'll look nice, I think. But it would really would help them out quite a bit. So, good enough? So, but I think, yeah, either at the retreat, we'll bring you a plan, or we could schedule a work session in October.
Thanks, Dan.
Any questions for Dan at all?
Construction on the Town Park Plaza, when would that begin?
It's out to bid, so the bids are due around Labor Day. We
Mhm.
might push it just a week too. You're supposed to see a contract, the second meeting in September, so that would be on the 15th. And then it could start as early as the last week of September, depending, you know, the farmer's market ends on the last Friday, in September. So we want to do anything until then. But yeah, we'll just see how many bids we get and whether or not we can afford it. I'm optimistic. It's under 1,100 square feet, so I'm optimistic that we should get a price around $1 million. You know, so we'll be in the ballpark with what we have funded, and then whether or not we need more money, we'll talk about that. But so ideally, if they could get at least start working and maybe digging some holes in September, we're gonna next week I'm gonna submit the plan set to the building department kind of ahead of time and at least get the building permit going, and then have the individual contracts for plumbing, electrical, mechanical do their thing later. It's kind of simpler, but they've done that for us before. But what that does is it gets us into the system, and then the building officials can review our plans and find out if there's anything wrong with them. And then we kind of pick up that slack. So hopefully that they could actually hit the ground running. So I
So
think
in
that's
the
pretty
fall,
optimistic.
so this fall possibly.
Yeah,
This fall
and
possibly.
Typically, our construction window in the fall's pretty
Mhm.
good. You know, we can usually do work well into November. Last year, November was amazing, but you know, you just never know. And we get snowstorms, but then it kind of melts off and we can do other things. So we'll just have to see what they want to do. I put in the bid contracts that they could do the water service work. That we have to connect the water service to the water main in East Levante Street. I told them that they could do that in the spring. So they can do everything they need to do with the building department to get the water line in there. And then spring, we can come back, tear up the road, bring the water service in and connect it. So we gave them a lot of flexibility. So hopefully, because that might be a tight fit for the fall, but they might try to do that too. I don't know. But I'm sure we'll get at least one bid. I've gotten quite a few questions from one contractor. So that means they're actually looking at the plan. So, but we had 15 people come to the pre-bid. It was a mandatory pre-bid. So that's good. We don't build buildings very often. So that was pretty nice. So we're also working on, supposed to get that soils report quote for doing some work around the seawall here at the end of the month. And then I need to run it through the contractor. I mean, the way that, what the number that you saw before, the $5 million, that was a design build number with a guaranteed maximum price. So if we hired JHL, they would just do it and you get done. We talked about this at the last meeting. That does not do anything for the T. That doesn't. So my point being is you're going to see some number. You might look at that compared to what's in the items for JHL's bid, and you're like, hey, well, this is crazy different. But it's because that was all lumped together in a design bid thing. So you can't really compare apples and apples. And what I want to do is take the proposal we get from the Geotech and send that to the contractor, JHL, and have their engineer they would want to use to look at it, make sure they don't need additional information. We don't do sheet piling ever, so they might need some additional testing for the geotechnical soils and stuff. Design that properly. So, anyway, so
Hot
Then-
question is pickleball, when will it be ready to play roughly?
well, I'll just say that the pickleball, as soon as they get the court topping on there and the nets are in and the slats are done and Marinder's done with their contract, we can get people in there while Columbine's doing the concrete walks around it. We can get people in through the Hasty Park, the little dog
Mhm.
park, so they can walk down steps and get in there. So even if Columbine, is into September, which they probably will be, we didn't want them to start because of the dust issue. They
Mhm.
pressure washed the whole thing yesterday and we didn't want to get more dust on it. So we didn't want that conflict. So, but as soon as they get the topping material on there, then we'll talk to Columbine about getting in there, finishing up the sidewalk and topsoil.
So they did the texturing today.
Okay.
And then on top of that is the coloring. And then the lines. So, their contract ends the 30th of August. So they pushed it right to the end on us. So.
Other questions,
Is
Councilor?
there any interest in the Bug Ryan's liquidation?
We will have a walkthrough on Monday. So and then we'll find out because I don't know. No one submitted a question through VidNet, so I have no idea, but hopefully somebody will show up. Otherwise, that'll tell us what we need to know. So,
So they're gonna walk through the building itself and.
yeah, the RFP is simple. It's just like walk through the building, write down what you want specifically, and tell us how much you want to give us. And it could be, and I think working with the town attorney he said, they might say, you need to pay us $5,000. So we don't know how it's going to work out. It's just one of those things. We're doing an RFP and we'll see what we get. And then that will come to Dillon Urban Renewal Authority sometime, probably the second meeting in September with the proposals, then you can evaluate them.
And the town attorney's satisfied with that process,
Yes, he
with,
reviewed.
with the limitations of the building.
Yeah,
as-
it's a very odd, it's an odd thing. I think the main thing we were trying to do as a staff to protect the town from liability is not have like a garage sale where you have hundreds of people coming in and out of there because there are some issues with the building. So we just want to limit it. So the way the RFP is written is that, come take what you want. If you need to remove a wall, you're going to have to pay to get it structurally analyzed and things like that. Get a building permit and all those things. But so we made it so it's just whoever does the contract has to indemnify the town and have insurance and before to enter the building and remove stuff.
You're looking at one person to do all the liquidation. Is that what
Yes.
you're saying? Okay.
Yeah, and again, we've never done this. So it's not, they don't teach this in civil engineering school. So we're gonna see what we get. And then you guys can discuss it and find out the best.
So like an auctioneer, is he gonna be like,
Yeah, we certainly do that.
Gonna auction up that fireplace and
Well, so that's.
that's up for sale
Yeah.
too.
if you're into
anything.
the 70s, then sure.
I love
I just wrote the RFP. It says you can't compromise the building. So you can't remove, plumbing, walls and stuff. But again, none of us have done this. And then when we do the Meridian Institute building, we'll know a little more about that. Although I don't know that there's anything of value there. So
If they manage to get all the equipment in, they should be able to get it out.
yeah, there's a big garage door. I think the issue is the vats that are up by the bar. There's some internal windows they'll have to remove it, but I think they can get it down to the lower area.
Yeah.
The kettles were all craned in because we helped
Oh.
with that. Public Works actually, they came on a semi and we helped tip them upright. And then Travis hired a crane and then they craned them up and in. So how they come out, I don't.
Yeah, and that's a good point. We don't know, it wasn't even a thing on BidNet. There was dairy vats, but not like brewery vats, which I thought was interesting. But, so I clicked that box to see if anybody's interested. Kitchen supplies, of course. There was a line item for kitchen supplies, demolition, recovery, stuff like that. But, we'll find out. And I think the other thing too, we'll discuss in the retreat is just, do we want to budget soon to demo that building? And just kind of get rid of it, so it's not an eyesore. I've always been a big proponent from an economic development standpoint. If you create those kind of developable lots, so you get rid of that big obstacle, which is remove the building and go through all that processes, the asbestos report, asbestos removal. We're going to do all that, maybe it's nice to come to a town and go, hey, there's a developable lot. Do something with this tomorrow. Jump through hoops. So it's a philosophy that you may or may not agree with, but it might be something that it's beneficial to remove that building sooner than later. So, enough about that? I don't know, but yeah, so the meeting in mid-September, because the first meeting is on the 1st, it'll be the 15th. We'll bring those proposals to you and let you know what's going on. So,
I guess the only thing is there are a bunch of antiques that are mounted on the walls. And
well, we can walk you through there. Now, some person's antique is just old.
no, I meant for
So-
for the historical society, they could auction it off, is all I'm saying.
Okay, well, we can, if you
That
want.
might be possible, is all I'm
Well, what are you doing Monday?
saying. Yeah, no, I can if you want.
We will be there from 9 to 12. And if you want to make a list of things, I know, I think the events department came, took a few little things, knickknacks here and there. We've been asked to just inventory what we take. So we put it on
Okay.
a sheet, said, so that people aren't taking it home, kind of a thing. So,
Well, they have an auction every year, so.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, so we're going to be there from 9 to 12. That's where I'll be.
Okay.
And just answering questions. So if you want to make a list of those things, we could remove them from the building that day, or I can write an RFP to say they're not available now. Because right now, anything like that is up for grabs. So we can do an RFP and just say, okay, we're going to keep this, try to auction it. So yeah, if you could do that 9 to 12, we can try to accommodate your wishes. So,
I'll check with them to see if they're interested first.
okay.
Anything else from council members? Thank you so much, Dan.
Everybody?
Mr. Mayor, should we run through the planning report? And then
That's what I was going to ask Troy, is that, Troy, are you okay with us putting senior planners report before you? Okay, thank you.
I can be brief too. I don't know if this is on. The planning commission did have two resolutions at the last meeting on August 5th. One was consideration of a PUD application for Skyline Apartments. They did approve that, and by so doing recommended the town council approve it. They also approved a permanent sign permit for Point Dillon condominiums. Let's see, touch on a bunch of things in my report. I'll kind of just skip on to the end, I guess, and talk about, I included some information about the Mountain Energy program. We're partnered with, and there's a bunch of rebates available, so we're going to be pushing that out. And that leads to the last part of my staff report, which was the funding request from HC3. They did send a revised one because I met with them and said, hey, we're doing a hard push for our energy action plan, and we really need some help in spreading the word. And we really hope to get people to sign up for some of these rebates. So they did provide a new funding proposal of $35,280. So Heather is aware of that and has line items in the budget for it, but I just wanted to bring that to your attention. We've done very limited work with HC3 in the past. We've had limited success, but because we're doing this really hard push to promote our energy action plan and trying to get some people interested in this, we're hoping we can get 5 people to do home energy audits and 5 people to actually do some home energy conservation projects. So that's really where the bulk of that money is going to, is to help fund those. So I'm happy to answer any questions about the other things in my report or any of what I just about. So I welcome your questions.
I know the plans are on the diligent thing for the Planning and Zoning Commission for the PUD. Is there any way of getting it easier to the public so they can look at them?
Such as what?
Well, maybe something from the Dillon Town meeting things to the Planning and Zoning Commission so that they could click on it and see the plans rather than forget the plans on our Diligent platform to make it easier for the public to see what the plans are.
I can talk with Suzanne and see if we can create a page specific to this project.
I think, right now you have to go to the Planning and Zoning meeting, which means you have to find Planning and Zoning and then go to get the plans. And I think that's it's a little hard for some people to do.
I think there's isn't there a section on the website called current development projects?
Yeah.
Yes.
yeah.
Maybe we could put it there.
Yeah, I think we could just add it to that page.
But
It's
I
just,
just,
it's not.
I just
approved
wanted
yet.
something, to make it easier for people to, to click on it right away, since it seems to be a very, it's one of the things that people are looking at.
Too cumbersome and it's causing suspicion. Just because they can't find what they're looking for easily.
Well, I offer my availability to anyone who would like to contact me directly and I can send them things, but I will work on this too.
Yeah, I mean, it isn't impossible to find, but it's not easy. Because you have to go to Planning and Zoning Commission to find the PUD, to find the plans.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Any way we can make it easier, that'd be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
Other questions for Ned? Thank you, Ned, so much.
Thank you.
We'll move on to Troy Wineland, excuse me. Water resources update from our water commissioner.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. Just a quick check-in as far as time. 45 minutes, is that?
You can have probably more than that because
Okay.
you're it outside of agenda review.
Okay. I just want to make sure I leave time for questions because I think that's the most important piece of all this is hearing your questions and answering your questions. So I just want to make sure I allot enough time for that. So thank you very much for having me here this evening. I'm sure you probably heard that I spoke with Barbara and Linda I was over at the farmer's market a couple weeks ago and just got to chatting with them and offered my time to just have a little discussion. My thought was just give you an update as to where we're at, how we got here, give you a little water law primer. And I guess quick show of hands, just fundamentally, who is not aware or familiar with the prior appropriation system? Like no
One more time.
familiarity at all.
With the what?
Prior appropriation system. Okay. So that's good to know, just so I can kind of set foundational knowledge. Okay. So thank you for having me here. My name's Troy Wineland. I'm the water commissioner for the Blue River Basin, which is District 36 in Division 5, which is the Colorado River Basin. So I am a state employee whose area of purview is basically coincident with Summit County in the Blue River Basin. So from the headwaters of Hoosier, Loveland, Vail Pass, all the way down to the confluence with the Colorado River at Kremling. I've been in this position for about 15 years. For the 10 years prior to that, I was with the Forest Service as a hydrologist, fisheries biologist, mostly here in the Dillon Ranger District, but also on the Tongass National Forest and the Route National Forest out of Steamboat. Water commissioners, what do we do? There's about 85 of us, the 7 principal drainage basins in the state. There's about 10 to 15 water commissioners per division. So again, Division 5, Colorado River Basin, there's about 15 water commissioners. And we are responsible for administering the waters of a state. Principally, water quantity is what we're most concerned about. not necessarily water quality. Our jobs is to make sure that anyone and everyone who's using water is only using as much water as they're legally entitled to. I do dam inspections, field inspections, well inspections, keeper of the peace, particularly in a year like this, as you can imagine, a lot of disputes over water. Very taxing, very trying year this year, as I'm sure you're all very well aware. This is a graphic that I throw into every single presentation I do because it is basically at the foundation of all things Colorado water. What you're looking at is a map of the United States. It is showing that 100th meridian, a fellow by the name of John Wesley Powell, all the way back in the 1870s, realized the significance of this dividing line. It may as well have been just a very clear line of demarcation cutting through the Dakotas and Kansas, Nebraska. He noticed over, what was that, 150 years ago, he noticed that states east of that line receive 25 inches or more precipitation in a year. If you're west of that line, you receive 20 inches or less. Here in Colorado, our average annual precipitation is 14.5 to 15 inches of precipitation a year. And by far, the majority of that precipitation falls as what? Snow, yes. Full 90 to 95% of our precipitation falls in the form of snow. And you'll see later that this is basically the foundation for everything I'm going to present on our current conditions, as well as the foundation for Colorado water law. And this photo is taken, so the foreground there is Mount Powell Ranch, a portion of Mount Powell Ranch. The background there is Pass Creek Ranch. So right on the heels of that first that graphic showing average annual precipitation, I want to show and make very clear to you what this state looks like when we do not have supplemental irrigation. That's basically what you're looking at. In the background there, Pass Creek Ranch, no supplemental irrigation. In the foreground, Mount Powell Ranch, they did have supplemental irrigation. Just throwing that in there. And this here is Shadow Creek Ranch, just south or just north of Green Mountain Reservoir. Buck McNichols, he's the ranch manager there. He had a drone fly up there. I ballparked this at about maybe 40% of his land was irrigable this year, and he clarified that it was only about 15% of their land was irrigable this summer. Why is that? So hopefully you all noticed that one thing that stuck out, hopefully for everyone, was that this winter was warmer than any winter we've had in 132 years of record. A full 5 to 6 degrees warmer than average. I'll also point out that in Division Water Resources, our water year is November 1st through October 31st, which typically coincides with the snow accumulation season. So typically in November, that's when the snow starts to stick. And then the end of the water year is October 31st. The warmest winter on record. This is a scatter plot or graph showing all the water years, last 130 years. Current year is, as you can see, the warmest. So that top left quadrant is warm and dry. The lower left is cool and dry. So 2002 is most comparable. And I'm quite confident that 2026, once the full water year plays out, again, we have a couple more months of that. I suspect that point for 2026 is going to fall down to the left and be quite comparable with 2002 as far as dryness. Russ Schumacher, state climatologist, he and his staff pulled together this graphic, and to me, it was just a great visual. The black line shows you the average temperature throughout the year. The red bars above that line are departures from average, so temperatures above average, and of course the blue below cooler than average. It's just a great visual that kind of very clearly shows you how December, February, and March were the warmest respective months in recorded history. And similar here, we've got departure from normal for precipitation. So what you're seeing below that line in the brown, that is the cumulative total deviation from average annual precipitation. So you can see how we have accumulated quite the deficit throughout the course of this water year. If you were, unless you were living under a rock or behind a bush this winter, you probably noticed that it was a non-snow year. We peaked, our snowpack peaked a full month earlier than average. And that peak was only about 58 to 60% of average. Everyone remember that warm up at the end of March? We had about 7 or 8 consecutive days where we set record high temperatures that were higher than any single March day in the previous 132 years. That's how warm that 10-day period at the end of March was. That 10-day period, we lost 50% of our snowpack, a full 50% of our snowpack gone. So again, our peak snowpack was a month earlier. We lost 50% of our snowpack end of March. And thought I had another graphic in there. And peak flows also, you know, it kind of stands to reason. Peak snowpack was a full month earlier. Our peak runoffs were a full month earlier as well. Rather than peaking in the second week of June, we peaked in the second week of May. So just kind of zooming out and looking at the Colorado River Basin on whole, this is what it's a forecast. So the Colorado Basin River Forecast Center puts together a forecast for predicted inflows to Powell Reservoir. You can see how this forecast just tanked throughout the season. That final forecast, what was that? I think it was on April 1st, 959,000 acre feet. The average annual inflow to Powell is 6.3 million acre feet. So we were a full 5 million acre feet shy of average as the entire Colorado River Basin inflow to Powell. And this is a quote from Russ Schumacher, pretty well summed it up. So then bringing it closer to home, I used 10 Mile Creek just as a bellwether. We could have looked at Snake, we could have looked at the Blue. I just chose 10 Mile Creek. So again, the peak flow a full month earlier, and it was about a quarter of the average peak being about 600 CFS. We peaked at 150 full month earlier. After that peak, we had about a month and a half of flows on the 10 Mile Creek that are about 10% of average. And again, this was consistent throughout the basin, Snake and Blue. We're doing just a little bit better now with the recent moisture we've had. Currently, 10 Mile Creek is about 25% of average. So this is the U.S. drought monitor for Colorado. This is the June 9th. You can see that pretty much 99% of the state was in some form of drought, and a full 50% or more of the state was in the two most extreme categories of drought, which are the extreme and exceptional. And you can see that really dark, almost brown patch, basically sitting right over the top of Summit, Eagle, Route, and portions of Mesa counties. And the current drought monitor, you can see that most extreme, that exceptional drought has extended. And again, we still have 99% of the state that is in some form of drought, 50% of the state in either extreme or exceptional. These are the 3-month extended forecasts. Upper left is the temperature outlook. So you all have probably heard that we've shifted into El Nino. We were in La Nina, now we're in El Nino. So it's basically the sea surface temperatures in the Eastern Pacific. When those temperatures are higher than average, we're in El Nino. When they're lower than average, we're in La Nina. We have now moved into El Nino. The most consistent, I guess, result or outcome of El Nino, where we're located in the Central Rockies, is higher temperatures. That's something you can pretty much take to the bank. And we've witnessed that throughout the winter, throughout spring, and through summer so far. The lower right shows the precipitation. And again, this is looking at August, September, October. Slight chances for improved precipitation. And I want to caution everyone, you've probably heard it in conversations. People are saying, oh yeah, we had a bad year. We're going to rebound and we're going to have a record snowpack. Please, please, please do not put any money on that. We've had 3 super El Ninos. So super El Nino, that's where the temperature deviation is more than 3 degrees here. I think they're forecasting about 6 or 7 degrees higher than average in the sea surface temperatures. That qualifies it as a super El Nino. We only have 3 super El Ninos that we can look back on. Only one of those was favorable for wintertime precipitation. I threw in the wildland fire hazard, as we all know. It's still very dry out there. Matt Benedict with Red, White, and Blue, he puts out his updates, and I forward those out to everyone. We are not out of the woods yet. Extreme fire danger, as you know, the entire west, northwest of the United States, including Canada, are burning. We do see some improvement. Again, this is I would say probably entirely contingent on how that summer monsoonal moisture plays out later in the summer. Okay, so now we're going to jump into kind of a quick primer on Colorado water law, just so I can kind of set foundational knowledge, make sure we're all on the same page before I go talking about Dillon Reservoir and Green Mountain Reservoir water rights. So again, going back to that graphic that I started with, if you are east of that line, the water rights doctrine that kind of guides water use in the eastern states, it's called the riparian doctrine. The riparian doctrine is based on land ownership. If you own land that is adjacent to any water body, whether it's a brook, a stream, a river, lake, pond, then you have the right to use the water from that water body. In times of shortage, everyone shares commensurate reduction in their water use. West of that line, it's a very different story. So how many of you are either from back east or have at least spent some time back east? Just a quick show of hands. Okay, most everyone. If you spent any time outside walking around back east, you probably didn't get more than 100, 200 yards before stepping over some creek or babbling brook or pond. You know, we're talking on the order of meters between water bodies. Here in Colorado in the West, you're talking on the order of miles. You know, I mean, just right here, you've got Straight Creek. The next significant water body is going to be Keystone Gulch. You know, the sub basins tributary to the principal basins here. You know, we got the Snake, the Blue, and the 10 Mile. Those sub basins are miles apart, and that is entirely due to the aridity. It is very important to understand and remember that we live in a semi-arid desert. Please remember that. So here in Colorado, we work under what's called the prior appropriation system. So in this graphic, we've got a basin, all those water rights to the right. Those are all junior upriver water rights. And then you have the senior that is downstream to the left. Let's say that this system only has 30 CFS of water in it. So the way that the prior appropriation system works, the senior needs the 24. They are the first in time, first in right. So 24 must get delivered to that downstream senior. So in this scenario, the 1940 and 1960 water rights over there to the right, water commissioner goes out and curtails them. We basically turn off their water right. And so out of that 30, 1940 right, 1960 right gets no water. The 1920 right gets 6 and the senior gets 24. So it's all about seniority. If you remember just 2 things from this presentation, please remember that we live in an arid environment, and Colorado water law is all about protecting the downstream senior water right. Here in the blue, these are the 3 600-pound gorillas that basically run the river. And by run the river, I mean they are the most senior. They are the largest water rights that affect the Blue River Basin. So first we have Green Mountain Reservoir, 1935 priority. And then if you go, I guess up to the right there, that's the Shoshone Power Plant in Glenwood Canyon. That's a 1902 priority for 1400 CFS. And then the bottom photo, everyone recognize that iconic dam on Colorado River. It's the roller dam. So if you ever hear of the cameo call, the cameo call is a collection of about 6 or 7 very senior water rights that range from about 1890s to early 1910s. Collectively, they amount for about 1900 CFS. So by far the single largest water right on the Colorado River. These water rights are typically what drive the call. And again, the call is when a downstream senior is not receiving their full allotment of water. They place a call. Division of Water Resources, we go out and we curtail junior water users upriver to make sure that that downstream senior water user or water right is fulfilled or satisfied. The Colorado Constitution states that the right to divert the waters of the state shall never be denied, which after I tell you this following statement, you're probably going to scratch your head. The waters of the Colorado River Basin have been spoken for probably 5 or 6 times over since the 1970s. And what I mean by that is we have more water rights on paper than we have physical water supply. So, that rights to divert waters of the state shall never be denied. It probably makes you scratch your head. It's like, well, okay, if the waters of the state are already spoken for 7 times over, how do we allow a new water right to, if Scott wanted to create a new water right here in the county, he could do it. He can go to water court. Maybe he wants to open another golf course. I don't know why, but he could absolutely do that. It's just that would be a 2026 water right, and he would not have water to irrigate his golf course. The exception being probably in the wettest of wet years. So what the state does is we've developed a scheme where we offer what are called augmentation plans. So in the case of Scott's golf course, 2026 water right, if he wants to open that golf course and have a reliable stream of income, he would secure an augmentation source, more than likely from Green Mountain Reservoir or potentially Dillon Reservoir, to offset the consumptive use of his golf course. So let's say he irrigates with 500 acre feet of water every season. He doesn't have to replace the 500 acre feet. He's only on the hook for the consumptive use of the grass on that golf course. So we'll say 280 acre feet of water out of the 500 acre foot total. That's what's actually consumed by the grass on the golf course. So Scott would contract for a pool of water equal or commensurate with that volume of water that is consumptively lost from the system. And Green Mountain Reservoir or Denver Water would release that water on his behalf throughout the year. So it's as if that water was not removed from the system. So again, it's all about protecting that downstream senior water right. I should probably stop real quick just to make sure there aren't any questions so far. Nope. Okay. So augmentation plans and exchanges, that's how the system works, particularly in dry years like this. And so this is an example of running through what I just talked about. I'm going to jump straight into Dillon Reservoir. I'm sure you all are probably pretty familiar with the reservoir and its history. I just want to kind of highlight a couple things that are very critical to understand about Denver water and that reservoir that's sitting out here right behind us. As early as the 19 teens, Denver already saw the writing on the wall. They already had over appropriated the South Platte Basin. And they realized even then that they didn't have enough water to supply a growing city. And so that's why they started looking over here on the west slope for a new source of water. And under Colorado water law, the prior appropriation, it doesn't say anything about the legality or the illegality of taking water, removing it from a foreign basin and piping it underneath the divide and bringing it over to the South Platte Basin. And so Denver Water at that time put together their plans, built the dam as a 1946 water right. That's the priority date for the Dillon Reservoir. It holds 250, we'll call it 256,000 acre feet. Just a quick visual for you, an acre foot of water. Imagine a football field absent the end zones. Cover that in 1 foot of water. That's about an acre foot of water, 326,000 gallons, or enough water for 2 to 3 households of 4 for a year. And how many households that serves is entirely dependent on how much outdoor irrigation, because a full 50% of most household water use goes to outdoor irrigation. And just quick, currently the reservoir is about 60,000 acre feet down, about 21 feet vertical. Denver Water is anticipating we'll see at least another 10 to 15 foot further drop going into the winter. Green Mountain Reservoir, that's a recent photo. I don't know if any of you've gone down to take a look at it, but I highly recommend that you go and look at it. It's sitting at about 21% capacity. So Dillon is missing 60,000 acre feet. Green Mountain is currently sitting at about 135,000 acre feet missing and falling. It's anticipated that going into the winter, this is coming from Denver Water and the Bureau of Reclamation. It's anticipated that we will have roughly a 260,000 acre foot shortage going into next spring. The average annual flow on the Blue River is 250,000 acre feet. So I just want to make sure we're all clear. It's going to take more than one stellar year to get us anywhere near normal moving forward. How many of you are familiar with just how critical Green Mountain Reservoir is? I mean, how many of you heard of the historic users pool? Yeah, some of, okay.
I talked to most of them.
Okay. I want to highlight it because Green Mountain Reservoir is an absolutely critical piece of infrastructure, not only for the West Slope, but also for the East Slope. If you're all familiar with the Colorado Big Thompson project, that's the system of pipelines and power plants and reservoirs that basically take water from the West Slope, plummet through the Adams Tunnel beneath Rocky Mountain National Park, and then it just kind of cascades down through reservoirs and power generation plants from, more or less Estes Park all the way down to Fort Collins. In the 1930s, the Northern Front Range communities, they also could read the writing on the walls. They didn't have enough water for their growing population, and they also had a lot of agricultural land they could further develop. So they're the ones that came up with this scheme and enlisted the support of the Bureau of Reclamation to construct it. Fortunately, we had some really smart folks here on the West Slope, State House representatives who called timeout and said, hey, you guys are growing into your britches over there on the Northern Front Range. That's great. Under Colorado water law, you can certainly do this. However, We will eventually grow into our britches as well. You know, it's not going to be anytime soon, but we need to protect our water supply over here on the West Slope. So Green Mountain Reservoir was the first component that was built out of that Colorado Big Thompson project. And that was one of the conditions that the West Slope representatives, basically stood firm on. So Green Mountain Reservoir, 156, we'll call it 156,000 acre feet of water, principally divided into 3 pools of water. First and foremost, you have the 52K replacement pool. So what that water is available for, or its purpose, is to replace acre foot for acre foot, every drop of water that is plumbed underneath Rocky Mountain National Park through the Adams Tunnel, out of priority diversions, 1 for 1. So for every acre foot of out of priority diversions that Colorado Big Thompson project plumbs underneath the divide, they release an acre foot from Green Mountain Reservoir. So again, it's that whole balancing act of protecting the West Slope senior water rights. They take an acre foot, they replace an acre foot. So that's what the 52K pool is for. The 100K power pool is divided into 3 principal pools. 66,000 acre foot historic users pool, which fundamentally, and it's a very critical piece of what Green Mountain Reservoir provides. That 66,000 acre foot pool normally allows water rights that are perfected prior to 1977, prior to October 1977. If they are irrigation or municipal domestic, they receive protection from Green Mountain Reservoir. So for example, Shoshone Power Call is calling 1902 priority. And you've got, let's say we've got a ditch down valley that has a 1930 priority. Under strict prior appropriation, that ditch would not be able to divert. The HEP water, it's there to replace the consumptive use for that ditch, for all the other ditches that fall within that, that senior to 1977. So it protects irrigation for agricultural lands. It also protects municipal and domestic water use. In March, we were hopeful that we might be able to get 10,000 acre feet of that 66,000 acre foot pool filled. That's how bad the hydrology was. As it turns out, we were able to get just about 2/3 of it. It was about 43,000 acre feet. And just want to highlight for you, in case Scott hasn't, there's two principal reasons why we were able to store that much water, given the just abysmal hydrology this year. First and foremost, Denver Water back in 2002, they inked an agreement with Shoshone Power Plant. It's called the Shoshone Reduction Agreement. So rather than Shoshone 1902 priority for 1,400 CFS, rather than them calling for 1,400, we cut that in half. So they're only calling for 700 CFS. So if you think about that, if you have a 1902 priority and you only have to deliver 700 rather than 1,400, that keeps reservoirs upstream in priority longer. So that was one very critical piece of how we were able to store water. The other is the collection of cameo water rights that I mentioned down at the roller dam. So think of Grand Valley Water Use Association, Grand Valley Irrigation Canal, Orchard Mesa, there's Clifton. They collectively, right out of the gate, their irrigation season begins April 1st and continues through November 1st. Not this year. They're not going to make it to November 1st. They voluntarily reduced their startup flows to 1,400 CFS. They said, let's give it a shot. Let's try to prime all those big ditches with 1,400 CFS. As it turns out, that didn't work. They couldn't get things fired up, so they upped that to 1,600. So the 700 CFS reduction at Shoshone and what wound up being a 600 CFS reduction at Cameo, that is what enabled us to store on the order of about 40,000 acre feet in the basin. And it's important to understand that HEP water, most of it was stored in Dillon. because of what's called the upstream storage statute. Basically, we want to keep water as high up in the basin as possible, even though Dillon is junior to Green Mountain. So, and another thing to point out, I'm sure you're probably aware of this, but Dillon, they do their damnedest to play nice up here in the county as far as the marinas and recreation. And I'm sure you all know this, but I just want to make sure to highlight it. Rather than paying back their O2 Bureau of Reclamation HEP water from Dillon and lowering Dillon, they make their releases primarily from Williams Fork Reservoir so that they can keep Dillon Reservoir afloat at least through Labor Day weekend. I'm going to stop there because hopefully you all have some questions. I know I rambled through that very quick, but like I said, I'd like to save time for questions because I think that's
Could you touch on the lower basin states and how that affects our water? Because there's, my understanding, the lower basin states get first dibs on the water, so to speak, or no?
That's a complicated question. I think the simple answer to that is no. They don't get first dibs. So you're all probably familiar with the non-negotiations that have been not happening for the last 2 or 3 years amongst the basin states. Very important to understand that they're not renegotiating the 1922 compact. What they're renegotiating or not negotiating are the 2007 interim guidelines that were developed when the drought started in earnest. 2002, 2003, we really saw the writing on the wall that those reservoirs, by reservoirs I mean Powell and Meade, were not being managed effectively. Unfortunately, the scheme that they came up with, it's basically a balancing act. So if this is Powell upstream, Meade downstream, if Meade drops, they lower Powell to bring up Meade. In essence, that's what the 2007 interim guidelines were. Much more complicated than that, but that's the fundamental principle was Meade drops, we lower Powell to bring Meade back up. And that has been happening for the last almost 25 years. And it's been ratcheting down to the point now where the combined storage in both those reservoirs is about 22% of capacity.
And does that affect our water in any way? Colorado's water?
So Jason Ullman, state engineer, he's the boss of all division engineers, the head guy. He has shared in internal conversations and presentations that, you hear of the risk or the threat of a compact call. So in essence, that would be the lower basin states with a 1922 priority saying, okay, upper basin states, you're not giving us our 7.5 million acre feet. We're going to place a call. He has shared, and I will reiterate, several points. First and foremost, the upper basin states have never, not once in the history of the compact, never have we missed our delivery obligation. That's very critical to understand. We have over delivered since the compact was signed. And also the upper basin states collectively, we use on the order of about 4.3 to 4.4 million acre feet, a full 3 million acre feet short of what we are entitled to. Whereas the lower basin states, their average annual use is upwards of 9.5 to 11 million acre feet. So that would be the first point that I would make. Secondly, and very importantly, it's been shared with us, Jason has shared that he sees no legal foundation or principle or guidelines or guidance under which the lower basin states could place a compact call. So I'm quite confident the lower basin states have a different interpretation. But as far as Colorado and the upper basin states, that's our position. And I'd highly encourage you all, if you haven't checked it out yet, the Commissioner's Corner, Becky Mitchell, She's our representative for Colorado at those negotiations. I'm a huge fan of her. She is my hero. She is standing toe to toe with some very very well-moneyed, well-supported states. And basically, she's saying that we should base the deliveries from Powell and Meade, we should base it on hydrology rather than demand. Go figure. Which is what the upper basin states have been doing. We don't have the luxury of a huge reservoir to store our water, from which we can withdraw in those dry years. We are forced to cut back. I mean, for example, I have two ranches down valley who relied on Green Mountain contract water. So that's another 20,000 acre foot pool that was not available in Green Mountain this year. They could not divert through the Green Mountain Canal. That was Pass Creek Ranch and Mount Powell Ranch. I mean, it was just a non-starter for them. And just to give you an idea, Elliott Creek was down to less than 3 feet of water, 3 CFS, back in mid-June. Black Creek currently is less than 5 CFS. And very importantly for you all, I'm sure you probably follow this very closely, but Straight Creek is currently at 3.7 CFS.
Which is slightly better than it was in 2022.
Right.
I'm sorry, 2002.
Yeah.
Real quick, you gave a comparison of deliveries in terms of upper basin states versus lower basin states. But just for perspective, in the United States, the Colorado River Basin serves how many people? How many million people?
Currently 40 million. That's anticipated to balloon up to 50 million, I believe, mid-century.
A lot of people.
Yeah, oh yeah. 40 million people. I think last count was 17 tribal nations, 5 million acres of irrigated lands. Gosh, I can't remember how many national parks, but of course the most iconic is Grand Canyon. We didn't even touch on the implications of Powell dropping below the power pool elevation and the loss of power generation at Powell and the risks of releasing the water from the lower outlets, which were not designed for sustained flows. Yeah, I mean, we're just talking about a lot of very significant and cascading issues.
I have a question,
Yeah.
or maybe it's a series of, but do you have any recommendations for us at a municipal level when we're looking at codes, when we're looking at redevelopment, when we're looking at how we create a sustainable future for for the people who are here and what that looks like for many, maybe future residents? What should we be focusing on to, from a water standpoint? Because that's, we need it.
Yeah.
Where should we focus our energies or our attention to just, I guess, do the best we can with what weather is going to be coming and what or not coming?
Just real quick, and Troy's going to start talking about conservation, which is critically important. But just so you guys know, I've talked about this before. We currently are using about 330 acre feet per year out of Straight Creek, 330 acre feet per year. We have, and we call that wet water, and we can actually go a little bit higher than that. And that's what the water plant expansion would do with what we're looking. But the creek will provide more than that in a normal year, not now. But just so you know, we have an additional what we call paper water. So you have wet water and you have paper water. We have an additional, through water rights that we have, an additional little over 300 acre feet for the future of this community. That doesn't mean that we don't need to conserve with our source right now, which is off Straight Creek, but we have planned for and acquired water rights for the future of the community.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. That was actually going to be one of my first points as what Scott just shared. The town does have conditional water rights. You have conditional water rights for wells. You have conditional water rights, I believe, for a tie. We talked about this, Barbara and Linda, for a tie-in from Dillon Reservoir over to Straight Creek. All that said, though, I'm sure y'all have heard of Brad Udall. He's at the Colorado Water Institute at Colorado State University. He and Jonathan Overpeck, I believe Jonathan Overpeck is with Utah University. They put out a paper back in 2016 that basically attributes the bulk of the reduced water supply in the Colorado River Basin to increased temperatures. So I'm kind of doing a little backfill, getting to your question. They attribute a full 20% of the reduction in water availability in the Colorado River Basin to increased temperatures. So basically, for every degree Fahrenheit the temperature goes up, you're losing about 3 to 5% of water availability. And the principal cause or factor is a warmer atmosphere can hold more water vapor. So you have increased evaporation and you also have increased evapotranspiration. So those are the primary drivers in that 20% reduction. Higher temperatures, reduced water availability. The current forecast in that research suggests that by mid-century, we're going to have as much as another 20% reduction in water supply if we continue on our business as usual. And by business as usual, I mean, our carbon footprint, our energy use. So I would like to share, the science is very clear. It is abundantly clear. And the majority of scientists, they are in very clear consensus that we are in a changing climate, that climate is getting warmer. That again, the temperature side of things is much more predictable geographically. The precipitation side of things is not as predictable. We know that, one of the key graphics that I point out to folks is, you hear folks talk about the cyclical nature of snowpack here in Colorado. How, we have a really bad year and then we rebound and have a good year. And absolutely, we still have that cyclical nature. Sometimes we'll have average, above average, below average. But what folks don't understand is that overall trend is going down. So, and the extremes are getting worse. So my worst nightmare is that we have even just an average snowpack this winter. And we all collectively, because we're so myopic, it's like 2026 is in the rearview mirror. We all have to plan. And by all, I mean everyone. I don't care what side of the divide. I don't care what side of the basin, upper or lower. I don't care what your water use is. We all play a role in this, every single one of us. And we have to fundamentally change our water use and change our relationship with water. So I would urge town of Dillon, I would urge every community here in Summit County and Colorado to fundamentally, and I mean fundamentally change their approach to water conservation. I think water conservation, it is not a, oh, please do it. It is, you must do it. I think it should be baked in, at most 2 or 3 days of watering a week, at most. Getting rid of Kentucky bluegrass. I mean, get rid of it. Las Vegas, they're the ones who came up with the term non-essential turf. Have any of you heard of that? So non-essential turf is basically, think of all that grass that never sees human feet unless it's being maintained. Non-essential turf is being removed across the board in Las Vegas. And Aurora has actually adopted the non-essential turf as well. I think every community should adopt that. If it's grass in a median or an industrial park, get rid of it. If it's a public space, park, absolutely keep it. I'm just kind of throwing a number of ideas out there, but again, this is not the opinion of Division of Water Resources. This is Troy Wineland, experienced hydrologist with, 25 years of knowledge and experience. We must change our ways. We have all these amazing engineering feats that we've built, Glen Canyon Dam, Hoover Dam, trans-basin diversions and pipelines and pumps. But we created this artificial abundance in a desert. And we have outgrown that artificial abundance fivefold, I would argue. That abundance is no longer there, and it is being further reduced by a growing population, reduced water supply, principally due to warmer temperatures and increased evaporation and evapotranspiration.
So the overuse that we have, you talked about this is not a 1-year recoverable event. What would a recovery look like if we had a series of average years, or what would recovery look like if we had an epic year? We're still going to be faced with how many, what would the timeline be to get back to, let's say, last year's levels?
So you hear numbers thrown out there, in the water meetings that we sit in. Scott, I'm sure you've probably heard some of these. They range from two banner years to 4 well above average years. But I would say that, the best year on record was the 2011 season. That's when I started as water commissioner here in the Blue. A year like that would not get us back to average. It would not get us back to flush Dillon and Green Mountain, nor Powell or Meade, by no means.
Troy, we've been in a drought in Colorado now for 20 years.
Yeah, the mega drought, as you've heard it referred, is about 24, 25 years now. And significantly, going back to Brad Udall and Jonathan Overpeck in that research paper, they urge that we drop this nomenclature of drought, because drought typically means a short-term lack of water. We're now in 24, 25 years of extended water shortage. And so what he urges everyone is to use the term aridification. So basically we're becoming more arid. And this absolutely plays out. So going back, not this last winter, but the winter before, we had a 98% average snowpack. By most accounts, folks would say that was an okay year. That 98% snowpack played out to about 40 to 60% average runoff. And that's primarily due to the increased temperatures, the drier soils. Those soils, when they're dry, it's a dry sponge. That deficit in the soil has to be filled prior to the water that's coming from the snow, prior to it making it to the creeks and the rivers and the reservoirs. So, yeah,
I had a question. So how do we make conservation cool? Like, how do you make conservation the thing? Not necessarily just, I'm talking about the people downstream who are consuming Lake Dillon as well as us here.
yeah, that's the $1 million question, Barbara. And one that I struggle with. I mean, just for example, this year, you can imagine you've got on the order of 20 plus water providers, from the big ones, yourselves and the towns, to the smaller water districts. I was painting this picture very clearly back in March, myself and other water geeks. I mean, we saw the writing on the wall. It was very clear back in March. The response amongst the communities and water providers in the county was very mixed. And for the most part, folks were of the nature Well, our water rights portfolio is robust enough that we can weather this. So you guys go on and do your water conservation thing and, we'll do our thing. Now, in my position with DWR, I cannot force them to implement watering restrictions, drought restrictions. But believe me, I did some very serious browbeating and talking to all of them. But to get to your point or to your question, Barbara, currently HC3 is working on the revision of the countywide and the town-specific water efficiency plans. I would encourage each and every one of you, if you don't have representatives there, to go and participate yourself and lobby for those changes. This is something that I'm absolutely pushing for with all of the water providers. We all collectively in this county and this state dropped the ball in a big way. And you probably saw the article in the Denver Post. It was just a couple of days ago, talking about how 12 of the 25 big water providers on the Front Range have no form of water restrictions or drought restrictions, period. While the state, 50% of the state is in exceptional or extreme drought. I mean, to me, we just need to get beyond this complacency and this seeing the white reservoir on the mountain peaks in the spring and thinking that we're good. You can't look at those white covered peaks and tell if it's 20 inches of snow water equivalent or 5 inches. From down here, it looks white, so folks just assume that everything's good. I fundamentally believe that outreach and education is the most critical part of this process, Barbara. It absolutely has to be part of it. And I'm certainly, Scott knows, I host water talks with my water users, with the public. I present HOA boards, realtors, title companies. I'll present to anyone who will listen, basically to share a lot of what I've shared with you and more, just to help them better understand the situation.
I'd
Speaking-
like to, well,
Speaking of which, do you have one coming up that you want to announce a date for the next, or is it?
Gosh, you know what? I probably will do one, Scott.
Okay, I'll pass it when you have it.
next
I'll
week.
pass it
Yeah.
on to, okay.
Yeah, usually I do water over breakfast or well, yeah, you
I
can
was
get
at
down
your,
to
that was
the
very helpful.
but yeah, I'll probably be holding another one of those here soon, probably next
I
week.
just want to give other council members a chance to ask questions that maybe haven't asked any questions, or if there's concerns.
And I'd be remiss not to mention one last thing, very, very critical. So HEP pool is now completely depleted. We ran through it in 5 or 6 weeks, that 44,000 acre feet of water. So as of Sunday morning, yours truly and my colleagues on the lower river are now tasked with going out to all of those junior water rights that are normally protected by HEP water. That HEP water is no longer available, so we have to go and curtail. So that's what I've been doing yesterday and today, is curtailing irrigators down valley. They can only use their most senior water rights. And significantly, Colorado Water Conservation Board and the Colorado River District, again, they saw the writing on the wall back in March. They approached DWR and secured what's called an emergency substitute water supply plan to the tune of about $1 million that was shared between those two entities. And so they have secured water in both Wolford Reservoir and Root Eye Reservoir. So what they are doing is they're keeping the system whole for all of the domestic and municipal water providers who rely on HEP water,
Including Dylan.
including Dillon. And I will just share with you,
Never
One-
happened before.
yeah, I will share with you one of the conditions in that emergency substitute water supply plan is that if you are accepting this water, which is being provided for free, If you are a municipality or domestic water provider, you are to limit outdoor water use to 1 day a week, hand watering only. That's another conversation that I'm having with all of the water providers here in the county.
So maybe 5 minutes to wrap up and conclude your presentation.
So Troy will have to talk because right now we're on 2 days a week. So we'll have to chat. Yeah. Is the call, who's making the call right now?
So
Because we can't be called by Cameo or Shoshone.
we have two calls, Shoshone 1902, and we also have one of the more senior water rights at Cameo. The admin number is 22729.
All right.
So basically an admin number is a way of taking your appropriation date and turning it into a number. If your admin number is higher than that 22729, you are out of priority. And
Is
you need replacement water.
is the Shoshone, water project, that legal battle going to help us at all?
Absolutely. Yes. I think we discussed this briefly that day down at the marina. I am very thankful that the towns here in the county and the county as well pitched in money towards the acquisition of that water right, because converting that water right to an in-stream flow, it protects the West Slope water users. Everyone here, every municipality, every irrigator here on the West Slope, it protects us from Denver, Colorado Big Thompson, Colorado Springs, City of Inglewood, City of Golden, basically every trans-basin diverter. It helps prevent them from fully developing the remaining conditional water rights. For example, Roberts Tunnel, it's decreed on paper for 700, we'll call it 750 CFS. Only about 450 CFS of that water right has been perfected.
So their conditional water right is taking a backseat to the Shoshone?
The Shoshone call prevents a lot of those trans-basin diversions from further developing that next increment. And not to mention the in-stream flows, it keeps water in the river for our recreation economy. So very, very important to remember that.
So
And,
Troy,
yeah,
sorry, I sent your call update to our water attorney. So we will look at that and then we can chat.
Last questions?
No, I just wanted to thank the Dillon community for cutting our water use. And the last report was 20%. Is that correct?
25%.
25%, which
great.
is an amazing thing that we've done as far as conservation. And I just wanted to thank the community for doing that.
that's great.
Troy, thank you for your
Yeah.
presentation. It's
Anytime.
well received by everybody.
Always happy to dive into more detail on specific issues if you ever would like to.
And I know your job's like really tough this summer.
It's an interesting one.
Anyway, thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Thanks for coming.
Maybe we'll move the agenda review to the end of the regular meeting.
Yeah, do you have any questions about the regular meeting agenda coming up? Anyone? Okay,
Okay, then
you have a
we'll,
busy night. Thank you.
yeah, so we'll take a few minute recess and then start the regular meeting.